It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Freeman Michaels.
And Barnet Bain, good to be here again.
It's great to be here. And I'm excited today because we're going to talk a little bit about this talk that you're giving. Regarding it's a men's seminar, essentially a larger men's seminar. You're one of I think 75 people speaking.
75 people.
Yeah, some amazing people, by the way. Sam Keane, of course, Robert Bly, people who've been in and around the men's movement for
Jack Canfield, Neil Donald Walsh,
unbelievable.
Dan Millman. I'm very honored to be
Gary
in that company.
Gary
Zukav.
Incredible list.
It's called the Ultimate Men's Summit.
So it's called the Ultimate Men's Summit, and I'm excited too because you're bringing some of the work that we've been working on. It's wonderful because I, of course, have a very long background, going back nearly 20 years at this point, in men's work, and of course, many of the books that have been written by some of these men, famous books like Iron John, which of course is Robert Bly's book, Sam Keane's Fire in the Belly. Marvin Allen's Angry Men, Passive Men, all the works of Michael Gerian, who wrote The Prince and the King, wrote Mothers, Sons, and Lovers. There's just a whole litany of books that I've read, and men's groups that I've been involved with. So for me, it's really interesting because this is deep. It's this whole crisis I had in my 20s about what does it mean to be a man. And I did not know. I was getting very mixed messages about what was expected of me. I was under tremendous pressure to know a lot of things that I couldn't possibly know, but as a man, I was supposed to know them. And you and I have talked a lot about this. We've sort of worked and processed quite directly, these scars from our teenage years, our healing high school. We talked about that the other day, about all these pieces that have really sort of bent our perception in a particular way, and we've been recovering ever since. Mm-hmm. And there's no need for that. But we have a fundamental sort of basis that we've drilled down to, an understanding of kind of how this got set up, and maybe even a way to move through it. That's at least what we've been working on.
Well, we're certainly in the process of moving through it, dealing with it ourselves.
That's the part I think that's most important, is that this isn't something you take a magic pill, like, just read this one passage and you'll be fine.
I got over it.
Yeah, I got over it.
I had that flu.
Right.
I got over it. I'm feeling better.
I totally know what manhood is now.
So that may, at some point, we may be there.
Be great.
But I have no idea if there is ever that beachhead. I don't know.
There's no there.
I don't know if there's a there. I don't know if you actually swim and then you crawl up on the beach and you're there. That may be the case, and maybe it's not. But I do know, experientially, that I personally have been, and I am able, from that lens, to see the impact of it on others. That there has been a conditioning of what I value in the world, that my values are not truly my own. They are values that I bought into in order to fit in and to be cared for, and not to make too many waves, in order to...
in simplest terms, they're what you were taught.
I was taught those things.
You were taught, and you conform to them,
and they're not necessarily bad.
Right.
Not to say that they're all bad, not to say that they're bad at all, but certainly, in my case, and in the case of men, I think it's fair to say across the board, there has been an overemphasis on will and action.
Yes.
And less of an emphasis on valuing, if not downright devaluing, things like imagination and feeling. Now, that's very, very much, that situation has very, very much improved in the last years. But when I was a boy, I remember being in my room reading or daydreaming or lost in imagination, and my family lovingly saying, "Get outside and throw a ball. What's the matter with you? Throw a ball. Action, 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 action." And I also remember back in the day when there were like Barbie dolls and Ken dolls and
Mm-hmm.
G.I. Joe dolls,
Mm-hmm.
and there was that whole boys that play with dolls thing, but the corporations managed to find a way to sell dolls, but they dressed them up in
G.I. Joe.
in G.I. Joe,
Yeah.
and these were certain kinds of testosterone-driven will games, again, not imaginative games. So,
And I want to be clear, there's a place for that. But we're
Sure.
talking really about an imbalance here.
yes, and
And-
we're not saying this is right or this is wrong, but we are talking about across the board, in the aggregate, there is not a balanced sense of will and action with imagination and feeling, and that imagination and feeling are, in fact, to this day, considered a little bit second class, if not
They're
downright,
marginalized.
if not right, absolutely dubious. Now, we
Yeah.
live in a creative community, you and I, and so it's slightly different.
Can I speak to that for a second? Because that's
Yeah.
really the basis. You and I have been talking about, first of all, a piece of language. We've been talking about
Repair.
repairing. Yeah, that we repair, putting
And
back together.
what are we exactly, when you talk about repairing, this is such a wonderful piece of language.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about repairing, we are repairing, what are the elements of the pair?
I think they're the essential building blocks of everything, which we can talk about them in various terms. In the Eastern world, we can talk about them in sort of yin and yang.
Yeah.
And the Eastern philosophies really see that if this is out of balance, it's going to create chaos, and it's going to create, it could be catastrophic. It gets very, it can go very far in sort of the
Well,
a
let's
particular
unpack.
direction.
Let's unpack for a second the reason that an imbalance of yin and yang is it leads to complications.
Well, it has to do with context, because if you're just doing, and there's no real basis for it, and the basis for it, this is tricky. This is hard, I think, for a lot of people to get, is that it is something, it's what's underneath the choices we make. We talk about this
it's
often
the
in terms
space
of
that holds the possibility for the choices that we make.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, but that's a bit ambiguous for folks. Like, huh? What'd you just say?
Mm-hmm.
So let me try to unpack this in a way where folks can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be a little careful with language. I mean, I know we've talked in terms of the idealized feminine, the idealized masculine, and those are fine terms. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, we're not talking gender. It's not gender specific. It's just the idea that there's a quality in idealized feminine energy, which men and women both have, that allows for something that's where we find meaning in something, that where we open up to something, that then the action makes sense in the context of that.
We may want to look a little bit more as to what is the nature of this yin energy, this feminine energy, and that is the energy of desire. It's the energy of expectation. It's an energy of imagination. These are
Capacities.
These are capacities that exist, that are timeless. They are not constructs. They're not buildings. They're not doings. They're not grocery shoppings. They're not getting the kids out to school in the morning. They're not achievements.
They're the reason for doing all those things.
They are both reason and context.
Yes.
They are both desire. They are both the poetry. There is not a reason for glorying in a sunset.
Right.
It is a quality of being.
Right. Thank you.
That
because,
is distinct from a
yes.
quality of doing.
Yes.
And
Beautiful.
so the being state is this feminine energy that is the womb, the womb that is pregnant with the possibility to be filled out of this feeling of open-heartedness and bliss and joy and appreciation and beauty of watching a sunset. I can take that and look to express it in doing my laundry, baking a cake, building a birdhouse, driving my kids to skating. That gets expressed in a doing that carries a quality of being. So there's a paired relationship, a repaired relationship when we begin to honor both of these things. And often when we speak of, well, let's begin to look at our capacity to be, people say, well, great, how do I do that?
Right. How do I do that
How do I
exactly?
do that? Well, let's talk about being. I'm talking about being. How do I do being?
Yeah.
Tell me what to do. I will do being.
Yeah.
So and then you begin to say, well, what if you just sat and experienced your breath, for an example. There's infinite ways, but you just sat and experienced your breath entering in and out of your lungs through your nose. Then people, we are conditioned to go, well, what's the purpose of that? How's that going to pay the bills?
Right.
How do my mind wanders away? I'm thinking about what I'm going to be, what I've done. So we are conditioned away from a being state, and it is the being state that is the primal creative impulse of all that is. It creates the possibility to be filled. It's the space that becomes filled with doing this. And if we are alienated from it because we are overly concentrated, overly focused on doing, and have not developed the same degree of intimacy and closeness with being states, then and if we further diminish the value or disparage the value of simply being, then we are alienated from the very source of our creativity and our innovation. It springs up from that place.
Yeah, absolutely. And this creative piece, of course, is how you and I came to this, is that both of us are creative people. You as a filmmaker, me originally as an actor for many years, but I feel the artistic urge in me. It's built in. I have to write, as you know. I write quite a bit, and I have to. You saw some of my painting, the pottery I painted, and I don't know why I do this stuff. I just have to, which has been my lifeline, because in truth, in our culture, there are, again, very few ways that we can repair, that we can be in this sort of natural state of ebb and flow, of inspiration and action, where they go together. And that's a beautiful place for me. And the idea even of not having that, I've been caught in moments in my life where I didn't have my artistic expression, and I can tell you unequivocally, I got depressed.
Well, let's look a little more closely even at that. So, because often people feel, well, I don't have an artistic expression, or they feel left out of that conversation.
It's not a doing thing. It's
not a doing thing.
And there's no particular skill required. It's a state of consciousness.
So to begin to drill a little more closely down to that, there is a state of mind, of beingness, that relates to everything as a creative act. So that, and part of the over-identification with the doing, with this disintegrated masculine energy, the doing with disregard for the dance with the feminine mystery, space, emptiness that creates the space for the to be filled by the doing. Part of that diminishes the nature of creativity itself, and therefore it only validates a very particular, very, very thin segment of the creative process as being creative.
Yep.
So unless you are a painter, a writer, a dancer, a filmmaker...
and that's not what we're talking about at all. I mean, it could be. It could be in the sense that that's one way in.
It is the way the culture talks about it.
I agree with you.
And it is, and
I agree
what
with you.
we're talking about is broadening the sense of people owning that every interaction is a creative one, and the degree to which we push back on that is the degree to which we have been very, very subtly conditioned by this over-functioning yang energy to diminish what is our creative connection.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it's, as we've been working on a book now for a while, is that the whole process, we call it the creative advantage process. It stems from a relational worldview versus a reactive worldview. And there is a depth of perception in the creative advantage perspective, this perspective we're talking about, that opens consciousness and provides effective tools to meet life on a more profound level. From this perspective, everything is intimately connected, and as we learn to respond to life from this perspective, we become empowered. See, the old systematic conditioning, what we call systematic conditioning, that has been the basis for much of our individual and collective choices, is flawed. It's an old mindset that limits our potential and diminishes our gifts. So,
well, and it does so. Maybe just to fill in the blank a
please.
little between the lines, it does so by reducing the full spectrum of creative possibility down to use this metaphor, 5 buttons on the presets of your car radio.
Right.
So there's this whole bandwidth, unlimited bandwidth of programming available, and we have reduced it down to 5 presets. And the whole of the society is set up in a way that it really only validates those very, very limited expressions of creativity, and diminishes all other expressions of it. And it's it's not so subtle sometimes, and it is very subtle other times. But one way, let's just step into the fire right away.
Well, I want to say something too about this.
Yeah.
Can I go back to the capacities piece?
Sure.
Because Barnet, you mentioned.
You want to step into the fire?
Let's go. We're going to end
right.
up right in the middle of the fire, because the desire, the expectation, the imagination. That is the stuff that you and I have said makes life juicy. If we don't have those pieces, if we don't have that, to the degree we have more and more of that capacity.
And those pieces are feminine. And when men begin to integrate those energies, it is confrontive to other men, and it is confrontive to women. And they begin to, once upon a time, not so much anymore, but a man that was interested in music and poetry and dance, their masculinity was impugned, and people would throw, there were all kinds of cruel labels. Just the idea, generally sexual, generally impugning people's gender and sexuality, and even that thinking all by itself, that there is a hierarchy of man, and that perhaps let's talk about gay men, for instance. That's less than a man, and that is a very structured example of the kind of
tyrannical,
but the kind of highly structured, conditional thinking about what it is to be a vessel for masculine energy and what is appropriate masculine energy. And this masculine energy, when it begins to become integrated with feminine energies that are creative and expectant and have desire. I'm not talking about lust. I'm talking about the creative impulse, the desiring impulse. It is disparaged. And the most blatant expression of that we have in our world right now, and now we will jump into the fire, is chauvinism. This chauvinism is a pushback on all things feminine. It makes a hierarchy of energies. It exalts will and action over emotion and feeling. And it is, as you indicated earlier, it is not exclusively a male gender thing. It is a systemic problem now that includes both genders. Women are also overly or imbalanced vis-a-vis their feminine energies of feeling and imagining and integrating their will and action. As a society, we are oriented toward will and action. So this is a big, big issue, and the net result of it is it is violent to women, and it castrates men. And right across the board, it alienates us all from the primal, creative, innovative energies out of which bubble up solutions and new possibilities and new responses to challenges that will no longer be met out of will and action. the same kind of will and action that we have in our file cabinet, something is going to have to bubble up, and it is this the source of this innovation and in this creativity, as any artist knows, is this feminine subconscious place, this womb of possibility. So to the degree that we continue to push back against integrating these energies is to the degree that we will continue to have more and more stresses with respect to the challenges that we face as individuals and as a culture.
And we're not going to be able to move through them effectively from this from this conditioned place. That's the big fundamental piece. And I want to even go into the conditioned imagination.
Yeah.
Because I really want to speak to that. I want you to speak to that, because the conditioned imagination has diminished all of us, that we really can't. There's a realm of possibility that's available that we're not able to see. It's like it doesn't exist because our imaginations are so programmed and they're so narrow. You know, we think of imagination of, but we're really just, when someone's imaginative, so often it's not new. They're recycling other people's thoughts, other people's
thoughts, other people's stories,
yeah,
other people's news, other people's politics,
yeah,
other people's emotions, other people's feelings, because we have not been exposed to models that show us. We learn by witnessing. We don't have the opportunity to witness others whom we can relate to, having a deep experience of respecting their emotional lives, feeling it deeply, releasing it, and moving on. We rarely see that, if ever.
Yeah.
What we do see are people who have reactive relationships to their emotions. They attach meanings and stories to them. They very rarely release those feelings. They seem to just subside and go latent the way viruses go latent.
Only to resurface.
Only to
resurface and play out again and again.
They hang on to the stories. They hang on to their rages. They hang on to their assumptions and beliefs, and that is a structure that creates a false. It creates a secondary, like a virtual space, as opposed to the feminine womb of all possibility. There is now a virtual one of only limited possibilities. We now have a very limited deck of cards, and we keep playing the same cards to meet all of the new challenges of life with the same sorts of triggered responses and emotional experience. And so this kind of conditioning is so systemic. I mean, if I said to you, well, what color is this sweater? Most people would just say, well, it's green. A few people might say it's forest green. Somebody else may say it's kind of a pine-colored green. But, you know, this little iPhone I have, it resolves 1.7 million color distinctions on this screen. This computer in front of me, 3.7 million color distinctions. There are a few more distinctions in green
That's right.
than the thing's green.
That's right.
Now, that we don't have...
But that's such a great illustration.
That we don't have the language is one thing.
Right.
But that we don't pause to take in the distinction, to be present with the aliveness of this distinction vis-a-vis the other gazillion shades of green. We have been conditioned to reduce our relationship to the world, and what we are left with is a very limited set of possibilities and
expectations.
We
can't expect much.
Very minimized desires. I mean, we hear things like, well, don't get your hopes up.
Right.
And we hear strategies for success like, well, if I don't get too successful, then if it doesn't happen, I won't be disappointed. I've yet to run into somebody who pretended to have low expectation and for whom things didn't work out, who did not have, who was spared the feelings. Right. It simply doesn't work that way, but we make ourselves smaller and smaller and smaller by reducing expectation, and we have very stilted sense of imagination.
Yeah, there's exactly 9 ways that a man can be successful today in the world. I'm not saying it's 9, but it's not a whole lot more than that.
You can be an athlete.
Right.
You can make a lot of money in business. But very rarely do you hear, you can have a rich emotional life.
Mm-hmm.
You can be loyal and true as a friend. You can be a reliable confidant. We don't hear these nuances of the infinite possibilities that one can express being human.
And so many of us, and this is where a lot of this came from, is that both you and I played out a lot of the scripts and found at some point that they were hollow and said, this is not satisfying. There must be more.
There's got to be more.
That's my 20 years of seeking a male modeling that was sufficient to allow me this breadth of potentiality. And frankly, I don't know if I really ever found it in men's work. I found an open and expanding, but in the work that we're doing, I will tell you that it is broken me open in a way that now the world has gotten brighter. The trees are greener. It's like this whole potentiality because a side of myself is being repaired. That's the language.
Repaired. Now that goes for the masculine and the feminine alike. And we have people who follow this show, and some of whom have given us feedback from time to time.
Right. We do get some feedback every once in a while.
Where there's guys, there's one we were talking about earlier that gets very, very triggered about what is masculine and what is emotion, and I'm going to be all feminized. And, to which I would say that there is nothing lost in adding. It's not at the expense of. You don't become less of a man or less of a woman any more than the plug on this microphone. This microphone has a wind baffle, it has a plug, it has a wire, it has a metal spring to hold it in front of me. Each one of those pieces contributes to a system
that's beautiful,
that is functional.
Yeah.
The spring that holds the thing up is no less of a spring. It is fully a spring, and when it works in concert with the wind baffle and the wiring and the electricity that moves through it as a system, it serves a whole other purpose. But this is still a spring. These parts do not lose their integrity. So when we add on more, we don't lose our integrity.
It's a fantastic offer, and I think the hostility you're talking about is a reaction to the threat. The threat, because look, it's so tightly wound. This be a man thing is so tightly wound, and it's been so not just conditioned and drilled in. It's also it's been also elevated. It's been lifted up as if. We have these archetypes.
It's been nobilized.
Overly
strong,
nobilized.
silent male
Yes.
is the paradigm of masculinity for so long in our advertising and in our sports. Just do it.
Movies.
In our movies, just be a strong, silent type. Men who are expressive of their feelings, they are at the very least dubious around their masculinity and certainly around their sexuality. And women who they are allowed to have feelings as long as they don't have any feelings that are forceful. They can whimper. But if they have too many feelings, then they are, they're called names.
Yeah, of course.
And they certainly are not allowed to have any will or any action, or they're called names.
Right.
And so this, again, we do have people that we expect there will be those that push back. And I would invite them just to consider that the part that feels triggered or needs to push back is just to be willing to be in that discomfort for a moment and look at, what is the threat there?
Yeah.
What is the threat? There is no loss here, but there is the invitation to add to the threat a capacity of curiosity,
compassion
that already is feminine.
Mm.
Just the curiosity. I wonder what this is about. That is there is no doingness in that.
I love it.
That already begins the dance of repair.
That's beautifully illustrated.
I think we run out of time.
Again, but you know what? It was a perfect opportunity to just, The only thing I'm with this is there was so much to say, and we wove through it in whatever way we wove through it. But I'm very excited about the program you're doing, and obviously the work that we do that folks can tap into with your creative advantage, which, by the way, is going to be coming up soon. We'll have a page where people.
Well,
can
your
begin
creative
to...
advantage for our listeners. Your creative advantage refers to both a training and a program that Freeman and I are bringing into the world, and looking forward to sharing with you. It also refers to a book which will be out next year called Your Creative Advantage, that delivers many of the ideas that you have become familiar with us over the last year, and many, many more, delivered in the context of a discussion and an overview, as well as curriculum and exercises and a training. So we are very, very excited about that. And also, I'm inviting you to join us on the Ultimate Men's Summit. And for more information, you can go to www.ultimatemenssummit.com.
And we will have all this up on our website, both the Cutting Edge Consciousness website and our Facebook page, Cutting Edge Consciousness on Facebook. So please stop
friend
by
us on that.
and friend us, like us, whatever you got to do.
Like us.
And tell your friends about the show if you like it, and spread it around. Thanks for listening. Keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness.